afternoon. We're here today with Dr. William Ferris. Professor Ferris is the Joel Williamson Emminent Professor of History. He's also the Senior Associate Director of the Center for the Study of the American South and Adjunct Professor in the Curriculum and Folklore here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Welcome, Bill, and thanks for taking the time to be with us.
It's good to be with you, Gary.
Let's begin by telling us a little bit about the many different roles you have here at the university. I know you've had a very illustrious preparation before coming to North Carolina, and now we're all dependent on you to show us the way on many fronts. Tell us about some of the things you do here.
Well, I'm a folklorist by training, and I teach two seminars, one on the history of Southern music that begins with Indian music, ballads, black spirituals, and goes through country music, blues, gospel, rock and roll, hip-hop, Indian musics. It's a wonderful course. We bring in artists to talk and sing about their music. Use a lot of film and slides, PowerPoints. Mm-hmm. It's a media-rich encounter with the musics of the South. And then I do a seminar on Southern literature and the oral tradition, looking at how writers take storytelling and music and weave it into short stories and fiction. Mm-hmm. And we begin with oral literature, looking at an oral history I did with a mule trader storyteller, and an oral history of a black farmer from Alabama called All God's Dangers. And then we move into writers, starting with 19th century work by Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Then we look at Eudora Welty, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, and some contemporary writers who are here in the area: Randall Keenan, Elizabeth Spencer, Lee Smith, and they come and talk to students, read from their work. And again, we use a lot of media. We use films of these writers. In addition to those seminars, I work at the Center for Study of the American South, and we do a lot of projects. We're making films on several topics, like Wings Over Jordan, a 20th century black a cappella choir that was based in Cleveland, Ohio, and had the first nationally broadcast black radio show in the nation that ultimately became an international phenomenon. We do a Southern Cultures quarterly journal, the most recent of which features Southern photography. We do an annual Southern music issue that features artists like B.B. King and Pete Seeger, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, looking at the music of the South. So there's a lot going on here related to the American South and the rest of the world. We have an initiative called the Global South, and a symposium every year that looks at how the South connects to the globe. And this is music, health care, economic development. From the early colonial period to the present, the South has been a very global place, and this is an exciting new way of understanding the region. Rather than looking back to the Civil War, we're looking forward to the future, the growing Hispanic population, the Asian population, the globalism of the South as it's changing, and also how the South is shaping the rest of the world. Our writers like William Faulkner, B.B. King, and Elvis Presley's music, our films from Gone with the Wind to Driving Miss Daisy to Roots to The Color Purple. The South is a global phenomenon in many, many ways, and this is one of the things that our center is engaged in.
That's fascinating. This idea of taking the regional culture and
extending it and linking it to the global issues of our time is really fascinating, and we're fortunate to have you showing us the way. Can you tell us a little bit about, give us an example of how this is being done today? I mean, this is like you said there was a symposium. Who comes here, and where do we go to try and make those kinds of linkages? Are we staying here in Chapel Hill, or are we actually extending ourselves out to other countries and other places?
Well, really both. The University of North Carolina has a very powerful international studies program, which has just consolidated all of its efforts into a fabulous new building. We have many international students and scholars who come here every year. We have many of our scholars and students who travel overseas to teach, to study. We have a new facility in London that oversees all of our international programs in Europe. We have a new joint degree program with the University of Singapore. We are building partnerships that are very exciting. The opportunity for our students and faculty to live and work overseas, and for international counterparts to come here, is powerful. And thanks to technology, we can have joint seminars anywhere in the world that are coordinated with faculty here and vice versa. We can have a virtual classroom that allows our students here to talk with students in Singapore or London or Tokyo or Tel Aviv. And anywhere the cable is located, we can link and see and talk and share. We have an exciting project through our library called Documenting the American South. Doc South is a virtual archive of materials on the region. We have a website in that global initiative that includes all of the slave narratives ever published, Frederick Douglass and many others, that you can read and search for words. You can search for the word banjo or the church, and search hundreds of published books for that topic. There are many books on the South, works of fiction and nonfiction, that are there in full text. We have at the University of North Carolina the largest archive in the world on the American South. From the first Indian presence to the New South of the 21st century, these archives are an invaluable treasure, and they are growing rapidly. We also have the Southern Folklife collection, which has several 100,000 records. It has extensive films, photography, sound recordings that go back to the very beginning of sound recording, with wire recordings that were done by folklorists here early in the 20th century. We have the first recording ever made of Dolly Parton as a young teenager making her first record. There are many, many wonderful resources here that increasingly are being streamed on the web. We have a Southern oral history collection in our center, and we're working with the library through a new software that the library has developed with support from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to stream these interviews. And at the same time that you hear the interview on your computer, you can see the text of the spoken word moving on the screen. You can do a search for a key word in an interview and go directly there, and then the voice will continue. And we have thousands of interviews with mill workers, political figures, business leaders. We have an interview with a young Bill Clinton who was running at that time for governor of Arkansas. All of these interviews will be available anywhere in the world. So the University of North Carolina is increasingly globalizing and extending its outreach through the web and through technology in ways that are very powerful.
This is just fascinating and wonderful. I know that you were an early pioneer in trying to take technology in order to make cultures of all kinds more accessible to people. Your films are legendary and are in some of the folk streams collection nowadays. How do you see this continuing sort of parade of technology changing the way people appreciate the humanities, folk life, and just everyday life in a modern world?
Well, the humanities are the fabric of life in every culture, and they include folklore, the tales of people, your stories that you heard from your grandparents, from aunts and uncles, that you revisit at holidays. Do you remember when this happened? And then you tell it again. Those are very deep emotional links that every person in the world understands. It may be in a different language or a different continent, but those stories are the fabric that go back to the beginning of humanity. The novels and the works of fiction that we study are extensions of those oral traditions. The writers develop the voices that they hear as children and create works of art in the way that William Faulkner and Richard Wright created novels based on their memories of narrative tradition. So the humanities are really the flesh and blood of our identification as human beings. And technology today allows us to share in a much more democratic and global way the grassroots everyday life, what the French call la vie quotidienne, the everyday life of people sitting on a front porch and talking. We can now hear those stories. We don't have to be literally on the porch. We can simply watch the images. And this is a very important new world that younger generations are well connected to and understand in ways that I'm trying to learn.
You said something when you first arrived that I have actually quoted and reflected on, and that's that by providing access to the actual day-to-day lives of ordinary people, that this could actually lead to global peace, democracy, just a better world, because everyone around the world can appreciate someone singing or dancing or telling a story, hugging a child, doing the things that ordinary people do, and this will go some way to ameliorating the sort of the perception that America is about just big corporate logos. Are you seeing signs that this is actually happening?
Well, as Americans, we live in a world that's a small, interconnected world. We're no longer isolated. People watch us closely and we watch them closely. And the image we project needs to be a more compassionate image of Americans who have parents and grandparents, who celebrate marriages and childbirth and mourn the loss of loved ones in a cycle of life that is universal. And this is why the humanities are so important. Much more than the military presence, our greatest asset is our legacy of writers, of music, who are loved all over the world. There's nowhere we can travel that people have not read, Southern writers, seen the films about the South, and heard the music. And their writers, their films, their musicians have been influenced by ours. They admire deeply those traditions which are part of the humanities. And I love to tell my students that a proverb from Africa, when an old man or woman dies, a library burns to the ground. And that's what we're talking about. These living libraries exist in every culture. And whether it's Iraq or the Gambia or Japan or China or North Carolina, we need to build bridges of understanding of humanity, which are such simple things to show that life and death and the things that affect us all, we all share. And this world is at risk because of environmental changes and economic and military changes. We're all threatened. We're all in this boat together. And if we don't build these bridges, no one will be spared. And it's so easy to make a better world. In the 21st century, there is no excuse not to have global peace and prosperity and a globe that is healthy and enduring for the future generations.
Well, that's a marvelous vision that I think is well worth quoting and aiming for. This larger vision that we all wish for eventually gets played out in our day-to-day professional lives as academics. How do you encourage young people today to become humanities scholars rather than sort of going other ways to, not that that's the only thing they want, but how do you attract people to study Southern culture or music or dance or other forms where the economic incentives may not be quite so clear for them?
Well, I tell my students that they should do as I did, which is to follow your heart. Mm-hmm. To do what you love, not what your parents tell you you have to do. Because you only pass through this life once. And if you are happy and engaged in a deep way with what you do, then you'll do well at it. For me, it was going out and interviewing blues singers and storytellers, and my parents and friends thought I would never earn a living at this, but I loved it. And I eventually was able to teach and have a wonderful life. But we have to do the things we love and instinctively are drawn to, and that's the compass that I think we should all follow, is our heart.
Great advice. This idea of students coming to the university and following their heart is one of the things that I think keeps many of us as academics active. The roles that technology are playing in this are a double-edged sword, aren't they? I mean, we have whether it's students on MySpace or Facebook, or them in our classes with their laptops doing their email rather than listening to other students or us or participating in conversations. I mean, is there any easy way to sort of characterize this sort of world we're in now where technology allows this freedom but also may sort of change the way we teach, the way we interact with each other as human beings?
Well, I look at technology as a tool, and we can go back to the carving of the Rosetta Stone, the placing of language on a rock, which is the most permanent form of communication. That rock can still be read in the British Museum. Whereas the technology we're using today has an increasingly limited cycle of life. It may be a few months or a few years, but it will certainly be replaced, and the idea is to migrate from one platform to another. But if someone turns the lights out, all the platforms go dark. So we have to see technology as both a blessing, but not a total panacea. The coming of radio, of television, all the forms of media, the film, the cinema, people have seen as a doomsday change that would forever make their lives different and not as productive. But my feeling is I have faith in every generation. I think we need to put our faith in the next generation, and they are the voices and the eyes and ears that will lead our nation and other nations. And they increasingly have a global vision that is tied to the media and to the worlds of technology. And I see it as a dance. You know, we're dancing different dances. You know, whether it's the Lindy Hop and the Charleston or the Boogaloo or the Funky Chicken. Each generation creates their own dances and has their own new sound of music, and technology operates in a similar way. And you respect the earlier generations and you learn to adapt and appreciate the next generation.
Very well said. That's I can see why your seminars are so popular. This dance it's an interesting metaphor because dance is ephemeral. And yet, one of the things about the digital movement is that somehow we're trying to capture this culture, capture this ephemerality, and then somehow allow people to access it either remotely in real time or perhaps at some later time. Is there some contradiction there, or is it just part of that dance?
I think it's part of the dance. The wonderful thing is that we can capture the dance. You don't have to be in the room with the dancer to see the movements and to learn from them. And that is a wonderful opportunity because we have these great artists, singers like Enrico Caruso, that are no longer here. And we can hear them, thankfully, on the recordings of their music and imagine what it might be like to have them here. And increasingly, we'll have a more virtual sound with the images and the voices together, preserved in ways that we can sit at home and learn from or carry it into the classroom and use as part of our lectures. And I'm currently working on a book on the roots of Mississippi blues, and I'm drawing on interviews and photographs and films that I did in the late 60s. And in this book, I will include a CD and a DVD. So this is a wonderful, brave new world for me, because in my earlier work, you would publish a book, and maybe if you were lucky, you would get a film done or do a long-playing 33 1/3 record. But now we can put it all into one single book, and a teacher or a student or someone just interested can read the text, see the photographs, and then go listen to the interviews and actually watch films of musicians talking and singing. So this is a significant movement towards capturing the beauty and the power of a moment like that dance. And to me, that's so exciting that I feel blessed to have lived into these worlds in ways that allow me to be a part of that.
I'm thinking about the film you made, "Give My Poor Heart Ease," which is a classic and has some astounding music in it. So I will look forward to this book on the music from the roots of blues.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that anyone out there who sees this will want to go and find that. I know that you've given your entire archive to the university library here, and slowly this is beginning to be made available. You're a believer in sort of open access and open source, and I commend you for that. Do you see other scholars and intellectual creators sort of moving in this direction where we try to use institutional repositories or perhaps non-traditional publishing venues? Is that a trend that you see in your world?
Very much so. I, as a folklorist, have done documentary films to try to capture and share the moments that I think are especially powerful. B.B. King singing the blues, or a preacher preaching a little rural church sermon. But for most of us who do documentary film, those films sit on dusty shelves and very few people see them. But now, thanks to the University of North Carolina and iBiblio, we have a website that is basically allowing documentary films to be streamed to anyone in the world that wants to watch them. It's called Folk Streams, and it was developed by a folklorist who did his master's degree at the University of North Carolina, Tom Davenport. And 7 or 8 of my films, including Give My Poor Heart Ease, are all on there. And not only are the films on there, but there are transcripts of the films, and embedded within those are narrative materials that talk about each scene and how it was filmed. And many folklorists and documentary filmmakers are putting their work in there. So for the first time, people anywhere in the world interested in B.B. King will be able to find that, watch the film, and use it in ways that are very meaningful. So this is a quantum leap. And again, the University of North Carolina is pioneering these new initiatives.
Well, this is heady stuff and exciting times for both you and us here at UNC and in this global world that we live in. Are there other things you'd like to say before we bring this to a close?
Well, I'm a great believer in libraries and the importance of archiving and preserving collections. And I am delighted to know that the University of North Carolina has the finest library school in the nation, and they have 2 tracks. One is the study of the printed traditional sort of text. The other is the study of the digital worlds that allow the streaming and sharing on the internet. And you and your colleagues and students are on the cutting edge of these changes, and I find that especially wonderful to have a world-class university with a world-class library that is moving its collections into the worlds of the internet. And so for me as a folklorist, it's really as good as it gets to be here.
Well, we're certainly fortunate to have you, and I want to thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Gary.